On this episode of A State of Control, we're going to talk about the future of AV programming, where you should go if you're just now getting into the business, and the death of the middle-class programmer. All that and more, next on A State of Control.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A State of Control is brought to you by our fine group of underwriters, companies like Middle Atlantic. A State of Control. This is A State of Control, episode 21, recorded Wednesday, October 28th, 2015. Gold Rush. This is A State of Control, the monthly look at control and automation for the AV community by AVNation. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us this month is Mr. Control Concepts himself. His name is Steve Greenblatt. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be back.
Indeed. And also with us, Uncle Richie, the guy I got to see for the second time in my life in real meat space at CEDIA a couple weeks ago. How are you, sir?
Good. Glad to be back off of quasi-hiatus and getting a chance to chat with you fine gentlemen.
Well, you know, it's not like any of us are busy or anything. So
No.
The one thing is, what we're going to do on this month's episode, just so you know, as you're listening here, we're just going to kind of commiserate. Honestly, the three of us, we all get busy, and I say, you know, we're not busy, kind of tongue in cheek. Right now, everybody that we called was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do it right now. I can't do it this week or next week or the week after that." I was talking with some friends of ours. One of the integrators that helps us out, and a number of their folks have been on actually this podcast and some others. They have something in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 1,000 hours of programming to do in the next 3 months. It's like, okay, sure, awesome. How you doing that? You know, a whole lot of no sleep. So first thing is what we're going to do is we're just talking about business cycles, right? Business cycles for us, business cycles for folks who work and live in this whole programming area, because education, they have their peaks and valleys, right? When I was a tech manager, you would work your tail off June, July, and August, and you had a set deadline. You knew good and well that the first day or two of classes, and that was your goal, that was your deadline. Once that first couple of days hit, though, not saying that we didn't do anything during the semester, but we didn't do anything during the semester. I mean, you kind of had it easy. I'm going to get hate mail now from tech managers, but you kind of got ready for the winter, right? You fix things as they broke. You were kind of a fireman. And then you kind of got ready for the winter, and the same thing during the winter. During the winter break, you had a couple of weeks there that you just worked your tail off, and then you had that set date. And then during the spring, again, you started getting ready for the summer install. We don't really have that in Control World. There's not, because we were in so many different areas. We're in education, we're in corporate, we're in government, right? And government has their own buying season. But Steve, we'll start with you on this. How do you plan, I guess? How do you plan for training? How do you plan for education? How do you plan for manpower when you're not really sure the ups and downs that you're going to have over the course of the year?
Definitely not an easy task. We do have a little bit of a sense, and we do try to follow some trends and try to stay in touch with our customers. And we know that the summer is typically a busy time because of the type of business we do. So we try to reserve that time. We try to encourage vacations and other things in the winter when we know we have a little bit more of a relaxed schedule, probably from February till April or May, although we hope it doesn't last too long. But it's important actually to try to pace those different types of activities, and when you have a team too, you have to stagger the training. You can't have your whole team go all at once because you can't have nobody manning the ship. So it's important to do some forecasting. It's important to have and manage a schedule really on a daily basis, and try to fill in those blanks and take advantage of, even if it's a day or a half a day or even a couple hours, have your list of things that you need to do, whether it's something having to do with maintenance, whether it's a pet project, whether it's some R&D, or whether it's some time of non-schedule-based training, whether it's on-demand training or so forth. When we're talking about classroom training, those have to be scheduled even as though they were a project. You plan for them in advance, you put them on your calendar, and you work around them. I actually have for myself a big 12-month calendar I started doing, where I can look at what are the things that I know that I have to work around within the year, and then try to fill in the gaps with other types of commitments, events, and I guess activities that I know I can plan for.
All right, Mr. Fregosa, how do you then, in a different area, Steve does a lot of corporate and higher ed, you do a lot of residential. How do you budget for that? How do you budget manpower? How do you budget money? How do you budget time without knowing some of these certain things? Is it like Steve said, having a 12-month calendar in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think also if you've been in business long enough, you're going to spot your own trends.
Okay.
And just historically, I mean, I know for a fact that, I mean, there's been periods in my career where we were 90-10 residential. We were periods where we were 90-10 commercial. And you kind of see where your trends go in between. Residential, we follow the construction cycle. It's as the construction cycle goes, we go. So we know typically around major holidays, we're going to see things peaking up, because for whatever masochistic reason, people set these as milestones. You've got major holidays that people said, where they've got their July 4th or their Thanksgiving or their Christmas, or or a wedding or something. So you hope that you do your best work possible from a planning standpoint. You give yourself enough of a cushion, and I think more importantly, there's that sports term, is you learn to start playing within yourself. And I think that's where a lot of companies wind up getting in trouble, which is that they feel that they've got to cram all the business in and make sure that they're set, and next thing they know, they potentially get overwhelmed, and then quality of your work goes down. I mean, it's all of these things. It's from a planning standpoint, we look at making sure that any project we take on, can we handle another project at the same time consecutively, or concurrently, and maintain the quality of our work. That's the first question that I always ask, because if we can't, then we're ultimately not going to get that next referral, and we work almost exclusively on referral at this point. So I've said it time and time again, sometimes the best job you get is the one you say no to. And especially when it comes to the control systems programming, because everybody's on a deadline, right? I mean, you've got all the trades that come in, you've got the construction trade, you've got everything, you've got electrical, and then invariably what happens? Integrator comes in, their timeline that they spent a year mapping out or 6 months mapping out and going, we've got it all set. Next thing you know, that gets compressed to 6 weeks. And everybody's going completely nuts. Next thing you know, you get the call where you've been on the schedule for X amount of time, and then, they've got a board meeting, or they've got a shareholders meeting, or we've got something else coming up, and we need to be ready in 3.5 weeks. You got to start doing your disaster planning from in this side of the business, and I think that, again, speaking specifically to the control systems programming side of things and the facilitation side of things, you have to be very, very good at crisis management from the beginning. You have to treat your projects from a crisis management standpoint.
From the beginning, though? I mean, it doesn't that... the reason I'm saying that, right, is it seems very stressful to treat it like that from the very beginning.
It absolutely is. And again, I mean, this is kind of straight talk, Uncle Richie, but, it's like if you are the type of person who thrives in order and consistency and, everything following A, B, C to D, you might not want to be in this business, because the fact is that this business, good, bad, or indifferent, we will put out best practice. And again, I'm not advocating against best practices. I'm not advocating against documentation and scheduling and standing your ground from that standpoint. But in terms of the day-to-day in the trenches, because I'm still one of those guys in the trenches. I'm still one of those guys that, occasionally gets on a plane and sets a laptop on a fold-out table, and I'm running around with guys going, is that on? Is that on? Is that on? There is, from a business standpoint, because again, we're facilitators. We bridge that gap, right? And it's good. I can now get my name back. I'm a digital concierge, right? My job is to get all of the stuff that somebody put in down and refined to the point that somebody goes, oh wow, that's cool and easy.
Mm-hmm.
Steve does the same thing from the commercial standpoint. We are that glue. And in order to be that glue, you've got to be the first one who can adapt, improvise, and overcome. Having a plan is great. More important than the plan, though, is having your contingencies for when something goes wrong. Not if, because it's invariably when. And you're always going to have that one big thing in a project. That's always been my feeling. Historically, there's always that one big thing. You don't know when it is. You don't know what it is. You just know it's going to be waiting out there. And you got to be prepared for it, because, again, you've got to hit a deadline. And you've got to make sure. I mean, Tim, not to bring up a sore subject, but you wrote a blog about this.
Yeah.
Right? Again, the best laid plans, right?
Amen, brother.
You couldn't plan for sickness.
No.
How do you plan for illness, right? But the deadline doesn't change. And that's the reality. So when they get compressed. So now, what can you do to minimize that is exactly what Steve was talking about. You have your 12-month plan. You try to lay everybody up in a row. And, if you do long enough and well enough and you get your process down and you partner with the right people, you can minimize that stress and you can flatten that stress curve. But I do think that in some respect, the guys that are still in this are, we're a bit of adrenaline junkies in a weird way. I personally thrive on the stress. I live for that impossible moment. Where you challenge yourself. It's bizarre, but it's part of the fun of what we do is to be able to meet a challenge and overcome it. And I think that most people that get into this side of business, we're problem solvers, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that really what we do? Right? We solve problems, regardless of what it is, whether it's a video conference, whether it's a TV or a screen or a clock timer or something, right? You're presented with a problem, and the reason why you're hired is you've been viewed as the best person to solve that problem. That should also extend out to how you manage your schedule and your client expectations and managing your integrators and working and partnering together. So, I mean, kind of coming all the way back, how do I do it? I absolutely go into my worst case scenario. I figure out where am I possibly going to screw this up and how much can I flatten this out. And then you reach out. And when you spot the problems coming on, you hopefully have a good enough relationship with people that you can move and you can pivot. But yeah, if, again, like I said, having that plan is great. But there's a certain point where, sometimes the plan, you just got to throw it out and just get the job done.
Yeah.
And putting yourself in a position to just get the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, a little bit different movement here is we've talked about scheduling and this, that, and the other. One of the things that more than one integrator has told me, more than one ops manager, more than one director of operations, there still seems to be the perception that programming is the choke point for a lot of integrators, right? And this is whether they have their own people or they outsource it or they have a combination of both. Programming still seems to be, and again, I don't know if this is perception or reality, that seems to be like the bottleneck, the choke point for a lot of folks. First question, is that accurate? And I know I'm asking a programmer, right? So they understand, take it with a grain of salt. But is that accurate? And if it is, how do we fix that?
Well, it's certainly, I always tell people when I talk to them that programming is one of the bigger variables in a project, and it's not something that you can look at it with a formula to know I have this amount of equipment or this type of a system, and it's going to require this many hours, and it's very cut and dry. I mean, you have a general sense, but depending on how you manage the scope, how you manage your customer, how you manage the situation, and also just like Rich said, there's a lot of things that are just out of our control. No pun intended. It's the uh, the whole idea of a construction schedule and a client's needs and other types of variables that come into play. They can pull a programmer, in many different directions. And if you're talking about a programmer who's going to be primarily working from their desk and has a network that they can pass their program out to, I think that they can multiply their effectiveness to some extent. But if you're talking about a programmer who's going to be at a job site, there's only one place that they can be at one time. So I feel that that it is a significant choke point, and it's something also that programming can extend beyond the installation of a system, and often does, whether you're fixing punch list items or addressing client requests, and some of those things can evolve and really not be too predictable. So having your programmer spending an extra day or two with a project is just going to cause a domino effect, especially if there's only one programmer supporting multiple projects within a company, or maybe it's a team of two, but still it seems to be that there's less programmers to go around when you're talking about the number of projects that are trying to get done at the same time.
Well, and one of the things that we talked about, Steve and I were part of the restaurant CSP meeting at CEDIA, and one of the people that were on stage during it said that, it comes to a point where you have to kind of make that decision, right, Steve? Where if it's 4:00, right, and you know good and well that you've got to be on site someplace else tomorrow to start a new project, and you have to work until 6 or 7 o'clock that night, but you're going to be done, right? You're going to be finished. You get sign off on that, versus you could work until 6 or 7 o'clock the next morning, and you're probably still not going to be done. You're still not going to get sign off for whatever reason. Not looking to point fingers in this conversation here, but there comes that point where you have to say, you know what, this is where we stop, right? This is where we say this is the line here, and we have to do what Rich said, which is worst case scenario, throw out the plan and let's go with plan B or C or D at that point. So,
and sometimes it's a matter of pulling back.
Yeah.
And say let's reassess our expectations here, and what do you need, and where can I get you to a point of stability. Even though we may not be at 100%, you're still going to be at a place where you have enough operation until the point where we can come back. And sometimes that also requires spending some time in the office and not being at a job site where there's a lot of distractions and pressures, and you have less capability to be effective.
Yeah, words like functionality and usability are used in those conversations. So
yeah.
Rich, we've talked about this on this show. We've talked about it on AV Week. You've written about it. Steve has written about it. I may or may not have written about it. We have got, it feels like we have a lack of programmers in this industry. And I say that with all due respect to the current programmers who are in this industry. Great folks, smart folks, some of the smartest people that I know. They work their butts off. They're very talented. They're very creative. It's just it goes back to a little bit of the bottleneck and the choke point. Where are we at, I guess, when it comes to our workforce, when it comes to programmers? Are we at a point where, the healthcare industry, they're hurting for nurses? Are we hurting for programmers?
I don't think we're hurting so much as we're in transition right now.
Okay.
And this is, you can just see the fact that the requirements of a programmer, and again, it's such a kind of a misnomer at times, kind of going back to the bottleneck, because it's if you're just slinging code, that's it. You're given a task, you do the task, you pass it on. There's a whole lot more that's going on. A lot of times you wind up being, almost a job site therapist, because you're bridging that last mile, right? The people that are there, I think, what winds up happening is, I think that the programmers that are out there, very few of them are able to be to have a single purpose. They're not singular in their job responsibilities. Technically and typically, you'll see that they're having to do a lot of things. They're having to multitask. So what's happening is that it's not that there's a lack of them. It's just that many of them are being asked to do things above and beyond what they were supposedly hired for in the first place. And so what happens is, from a perception standpoint, that's when things start spinning out, because it becomes oh, well, what about this? Oh, what about this? Oh, there's an issue over here. Very few companies, from a contract programming standpoint, that are maintaining staff and just providing those services, very few of them are going to be able to go to their partnership with their integrators and say, no, not my job. That's not a good partnership. So what's happened is that just kind of industry as a whole, we haven't given the techs the ability to provide a lot of the services that necessarily a quote-unquote programmer shouldn't even be doing. I see a lot of programmers, myself included, spend half of our time just doing basic deployment stuff, right? Stuff that should be passed on to a mid-level tech or somebody that you can train and work your way through. But what's happening is that's falling under the programming umbrella. So what's happening is guys are being burdened with it. They're not able to do as many jobs, and we're seeing that from the manufacturers, where they're trying to push out tools that are making programless programs. With the configuration, we've seen several manufacturers pushing out this year, their tools to do it. I think that the workforce itself, if you're going to have a programmer or somebody who's a pure code jockey, they may not necessarily be looking at this industry as a first choice. Again, there's lots of other more established programming languages and job opportunities and larger pools to draw from than when you whittle down into a very specialized endeavor in terms of the control systems programs. Again, we sit in sandboxes most of the time with our stuff. So I don't know if it's necessarily that there's less programmers. I think that the ones that we're getting are being overburdened, or we're not finding people who are looking at this industry as potentially the resting spot if they're going to be software developers. And they might be aging out.
Well, no, and that goes to a different question, right? We were talking about a mutual friend of ours, Mr. Murray, and Patrick he's a programmer in Germany, and he's taken his programming talents for AV and is kind of doing the software development, right? Is that, and I know this is a yes or no question, and so the interviewer me says I shouldn't ask this, but is that where we should go? Is say, let's encourage Crestron, let's encourage AMX, let's encourage, Atlona and Aurora to just give us the capability to develop software. Give us the hooks, give us the APIs, guys, and let us develop the software around it. Is that what we should do?
Steve,
I was going to say, I think that that approach is an answer to dealing with the ups and downs and the pressures and the schedules of the industry. When I say that, I mean what you mentioned Patrick is doing. It's a way of being able to not have to be tied to a project schedule and not have to be tied to a certain type of a workflow and those bottlenecks. It's great when it's busy, but you have, and many times you have more work than you can do. But then how do you keep busy when there isn't enough work to do? And being able to do something on more of a development scale, you're kind of choosing your own pace, and you're coming up with a solution that you have more ownership over. You own the project rather than being somebody who has to fall into a bigger master plan. So and I know you asked a couple of different questions there, but that was one thing I wanted to comment on.
All right, Mr. Fregosa, same to you.
I'm going to voice what is potentially an unpopular viewpoint, but for me, it's just I see the trends going to this. There is a push very quickly to eradicate the programming quote unquote middle class.
Okay.
They are going. They as part of what we've known as control systems programming will cease to exist within, I think, the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, then let's do this. Define that middle class for me then.
So you have there are software developers, which Steve was talking about. These are people who are, because again, with the manufacturer, so kind of a perspective. 15 years ago, if you looked at the major automation players, Crestron, AMX, Extron, whoever you have, we're dealing very much in proprietary programming constructs.
Yes.
Their language structure was only for their specific products because we didn't have things like IP controlled devices, right? We didn't have TCP/IP to deal with in communication. There was barely anything like a web page where you grabbed information from. There were very few connected devices, okay? So we were able to stay isolated in terms of the tools that we use. You could get away with being closed, make a lot of money doing it, and have guys that were just banging around. I mean, you could have a group of guys, and like Levecchia would say, who would be the file save as guys, like me, right? Oh, you need to make a change from this VCR, from the Panasonic VCR to the Sony VCR. Oh, file save, 5 minutes. That'll be X amount of dollars, sir. Thank you very much. I mean, you were making a living just changing devices,
Yeah.
right? Getting the call just to change a device from X to Y. Fast forward now, and you can look at all of the manufacturers. Although they're not open architecture, they see the writing on the wall that if they do not work to at least embrace the greater technology push that's coming in with the Internet of Things or whatever else you want to say, the BYOD movement or the mobile movement or anything else, if they don't find a way to play nice with everybody else out there, they will stop being there at some point. Because somebody's just going to come in with a lot more firepower, a lot more reach, a much better marketing wing, and say, yeah, see, these guys are really they're not valid anymore. Because everything else that we got, we sold 100 million of these things last quarter. Which would you rather have? The company that's doing 100 million of these things, or the guys that did a couple of thousand of these things? And so what's happened is that where I'm going to with this programming in the middle class is that there was a group of people who didn't necessarily have a software background. They didn't have a computer science background, that were installers or technicians or project managers who had a technical aptitude, who could be trained on the specific tools of that primary vendor and make a good living. Again, same kind of thing. Drawing a couple of buttons on the touch panel, making a change here, push out a video conferencing system, do a home theater and a multi-room audio system, ... right? There was a living to be made there, nice and in the middle. Just take a look at what the manufacturers have released just in the past year. Configurable tools, point and click. You can set up a 6-room music system with video switching and touch panels and an iPad interface, and you just click a couple of buttons over here on this touch panel, and voila, here you go. Now, does it do everything? Is it custom? Nope, it's not. But guess what? It fills the need at the price point of that middle of the road project. So what's happened is that profitability, which used to be the meat for a lot of integrators and programmers, it's evaporating. So you're left with two things now. You're left with guys that you can kind of sit there and just send out in the field and point and click send and make sure that the processor's online, or you have software developers who are saying, I have something unique that I'm offering. I have a skill set and a value add proposition because I do more than just load some canned code that I've been doing for 3 years into a processor and charge you a premium for. I mean, and that's the dirty little secret right now. So, again, just like the margin in TVs and everything else has gone away, that fat margin that was right in the middle it's gone because people are looking and saying, again, with configurable systems and this and video conferencing and audio codec and a couple of displays and this, well, we've got kind of a canned package. This is like 80% of what we need. Why would we pay you a premium if we can pretty much get this out of the box? And again, I'm simplifying things, but that's the trend. And so, what's happened, and again, I'm not seeing a lot of young programmers coming into the industry. Most of the guys that I meet that are in the control side of things are around my age. They're anywhere from 30 to 50-ish. Because again, most of us, Steve, myself, Mr. Lavecchia, we all started when, when we were cowboys. We were absolutely just walking around and saying, hey, nobody's done this before. I'm bringing something because I'm a really smart guy and I can get this done for you. It may be at a price point, that pinches you a little bit, but it'll be done. And what's happened is that the manufacturer's looking and saying, we need to find a way to set the minimum bar. Is it pretty? Is it custom? We're getting away from that. That custom concept is being pushed more and more away because we're finding that consumers and in the workforce, they're like, yeah, I can live with 80% of that stuff. And so now what's happened is that the guys that are really, really good are going out and saying they're providing product almost, at that point. They are becoming VARs, value-added resellers of that product. They're sitting on top of it and saying, I'm taking the base stuff and I'm making it better. I'm making it special. I'm making it unique. But that's a skill set at that point that, again, that middle class of programmer, they're not going to have. They haven't been trained. They haven't been educated, and they haven't been set on a path of education to become software developers necessarily, because that is an investment in resources and time. And what happens, these companies get busy. Again, it's you wind up eating your young along the way with these companies. It's like, I'm too busy, I'm too busy. I can't get these guys up and build them up. So next thing you know, you finished all of the work, and all of a sudden you looked at the market and it's gone. It's like, look at the satellite TV guys. You can see these things in many of the industries out here. And again, the tech industry is a perfect model for it. How many guys are out there selling, servers now? How many people do you see selling servers or, switches or all of these things? All of these hardware-based, profitable, meaty projects that are going the way of the dodo. And, from our industry, I look at it as saying, it's you've got a choice. You can either have 40 guys that are point and click and you pay them a modest amount, kind of the 40 guys in a truck and roll them out, or you become a true software developer. And we're seeing more and more that hard line being drawn and that middle line starting to go away. And so, we're seeing it in residential, absolutely. And again, and I think it's great in the respect that at least from the perception of the control industry, you're not seen as the problem. So many times the programmer is seen as the problem, right? Yeah. I've got a bad restaurant system, or I've got a bad AMX system. No, you had a bad deployment. The manufacturers, that's the common gripe. So they're now making an active push to remove that objection because they have to, because they've got the barbarians at the gate from the greater tech industry saying, adapt or die, baby.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this also. Something that you said was, the fact that the user, the actual true end user, the clients, are okay with 80%. Part of that, though, is the proliferation of technology, right? 20 years ago when you guys started, and I say you guys because I haven't been doing it for 20 years, there were push buttons, right? The first grayscale, actual graphic interface didn't come along until sometime in the 90s. Before then, I did
a jig when I got 16 colors on the touch panel. Because that was up.
You were
from
lucky
4.
You had colors.
Oh no, I'm saying that's up from 4, from
colors.
Black, white, light gray, and dark gray. Again, like I said, the actual colors. It's when we had you had two choices. You had amber and black.
And when was that, Mr. Fregosa?
1991.
Wow. Never mind. All right. So you had those, right? And if anybody ever had a graphical interface that you physically touched, that was their first experience, right? Fast forward 25 years, and all of us have something in our pockets, right? All of us have, our kids have user interfaces that are graphical and they're touch enabled. Panasonic or Pandora or Spotify, they don't customize that interface for every single user. They do it once, right? And they'll refresh it. They do it once, and it is what it is, and you use it how you use it. And yeah, you can provide feedback, and if they get enough feedback, they'll adjust it and do a refresh. But they don't do this, for every single person. Same thing with a lot of these simplified control systems, these middle of the road, these middle class control systems. It's one of those things where, it goes back to good enough, and it goes back to usability, really. They are becoming more and more used to this. This is the interface, and we'll figure it out. And if they want it adjusted, kind of everybody in the company, let's say from a corporate standpoint, everybody in the company needs to have it adjusted. Otherwise, it's not going to be uniform across everything. So, alrighty, Steve.
And you bring up a good point. I'm sorry, I mean, interject this, and again, I sometimes am being categorized as the Chicken Little of this industry, but the fact is that mobile's killing it. Why? And there's a very simple reason why. You no longer have a $5, $8, $10,000 investment in a piece of hardware that by the minute it gets installed, within a calendar year, the new, better, brighter thing is coming on for another $10,000, and then you extrapolate that over 50 boardrooms, right?
Yeah.
How long did the commercial industry and the residential industry just say that this BYOD thing and this iPad and tablet thing is just a passing fad, right? We're seeing for the first time a bottom-up approach, right? The consumer is driving the technology needs, not the quote-unquote technology experts. And that's causing a lot of people that are used to the way it was to get really cranky about it, because for a simple reason. Why is Pandora doing it, or why are these companies providing a simplified interface? Because there is 100 million possible users out there who are using that. Again, not a couple of thousand, not tens of thousands. Tens and hundreds of million potential users.
Yeah.
And the devices that they're being offered are being offered at a fraction of what our industry is offering it as. So, again, they'll upgrade, they'll change the technology, and a purchasing department has less of an issue upgrading, a $600 or $700 device than a $10,000 device. So they're willing to go into that. It's good enough. I mean, it's just simple economics at that point. So the need for custom, and again, it's we feel custom is more important a lot of times more than our user does. And
Yes.
we place a lot more importance on what should be there than our user does. And there's some hubris, I think, from an industry standpoint that's being corrected. And again, I mean, I read it, I see it, I've written it, I've been that, I've been that guy, I've been the know-it-all. And the fact is that, again, kind of this middle class of program is coming out, is that we will become more and more responsible to what the market dictates than what we dictate to the market.
And I mean, I think you're making a lot of good points, and I think that there certainly is a dividing line there, and I think that now it really does make us come full circle about talking about the idea of the shortage of programmers, and this configurable idea or the off-the-shelf solutions really do address that. And I think that of course, that's one of the strategies, as well as to lower the cost of getting a system done and getting it done quicker. However, one of the things that I get concerned about, or I'd like to make sure that the users are aware, is what are those limitations? What happens if you want to do something beyond one step beyond what is within that sandbox? And there has to be some education there, but is it sometimes that they ask for that, or is that a true requirement, or is it a nice to have? And when, and I mean, I think of things, of course, from a corporate perspective, and I think that they're used to spending money and getting what they want, and I'm sure residential is the same when you're talking about bigger projects. But what is that dividing line look like, and how often do you end up crossing it? And I could see huddle rooms and smaller conference rooms that are a little bit more plain vanilla to be very easily handled without the need of a custom program. But I think that there's a point where you need to be able to have systems that are expandable and can evolve with the user's needs, and sometimes I think that is missed when you're talking about these configurable systems, and it's a real conversation and a buy-in that has to be had from both parties.
I'm in complete agreement with you, Steve, but what I'm seeing more than anything else is that there are going to be less of those jobs for companies to compete for, because there's going to be that shift where the guys who are, and again, it's like, when I was in the beginning, I was kind of like a lunch pail programmer, I'm just checking my clock in and checking in and checking out, and away we go. That's going to be eradicated, because there will be that shift towards the greater percentage of saying, yeah, these are configurable, this is good enough. And then the onus is put on the companies themselves, saying, I'm your advocate, because and that's the transformation, and that's what I'm talking about, is that if your focus is to be only a control systems programmer, if that is where your focus is, you better revisit your business plan quick.
For sure.
Because what you're talking about, Steve, is the message, the underlying message, which we've always had, is you need to be a technology provider.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to be an advocate for whoever's hiring you, whether it's the end user, whether it's the consultant, whether it's the integrator. You have to be a value-added resource. People have to look at you and say, my projects get finished faster, more professionally, more beautifully, more intuitively, more cost-effectively, because you are involved. That is a completely different conversation than, I can connect an IR signal here, and I know the difference between processor A and processor B. Completely different in terms of the deliverables, and that's a company identity. That company identity, that's an industry identity, and that's your trade identity, and that's what I'm the most adamant about right now, which is the fact that I'm
misnomer.
Yeah, it is a misnomer, and that's the point. Is that most of people who relate to that term, and again, it's using a derogatory term a lot of times. It's just the programmer,
Right.
X, Y, or Z. Yeah, we do more than that, but the fact is that if you're being pigeonholed there, that's your first problem, because you're doing so much more, but you're only being seen as that, and it's easy to be the albatross. And so, that's kind of the whole purpose, I think, of this show, is like, hey, man, all right, and I don't like saying that, that 3 years from now, what I broke in as wanting to do, that job doesn't exist anymore. That it's long gone. I was lucky because I got in early. I don't want to tell people that. Hey, man, you should have been here 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Not really a good way to, to do the initial interview for prospective employees. Oh man, I wish I had you 10 years ago, because now it's like, well, what can you do?
Yeah, you missed the gold rush.
You missed the gold rush, and that is the biggest thing, which is it's the value add proposition. Is you are now a technology liaison. You're a digital concierge. This is what you do. What you're talking about exactly right there is you're an educator, Steve. It's educating the industry, it's educating the end user, and that happens at the top level. Which is, why are you using this? What I'm saying is that we're going to see a shrinking, and we already have. Again, let's face it. We already have seen a shrinking of the single, 2-3 man shops that just went around and would do a little, law office over here, or a small university here, or that. I remember, like I said, for me in the early 90s, I get called out of the blue to do 6 or 7 classrooms at the large university, just because, because again, everybody's busy, and there'd be 7 or 8 different programming companies there. You could go from room to room, and they were all completely different within the same school, right? You don't see that anymore. You don't. Why? Because again, the consumer has gotten more educated, and I think that, again, kind of being the critical voice, we need to stop worrying about thinking that we always know what's best for our client, and sometimes just listen to them. And that's where I think I'm finding. I think residential is coming around a lot more than commercial, to be perfectly honest. I think that from a commercial standpoint, there's still a whole lot of trying to treat your clients like idiots at times, like they don't know what they need. And I'm going to tell you what you need instead of like what you're saying is I'm going to educate you on where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. These are the options for you, and you pick what's the best solution. But yeah, I agree with you there. And I think
you treat them as rational, intelligent people, and you say, I'm letting you make an educated decision.
Yeah.
So if I guess if I'm understanding you right, and I think you bring up a really good point, is the idea that those that are going to be succeeding in what we do are going to be the ones that are going to be the specialists and going to be the ones that are working on these more complex and innovative solutions, but are bringing more ideas to the table rather than just doing the routine work.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's kind of like, you'll see, and you see it in commercials, you'll see contract, technicians, who come in at a lower rate potentially, but they're there. It's like, you need 50 digital signage players. You need this, that, or that. Boom. You basically, it's kind of like going to the union hall, right? You're going to have those two type of models. You're going to have companies that say, I've got lower level guys, but they come out, they're on site, they do this for you, ... But you're not paying a premium. We're kind of offsetting that pain factor. And then you have the other companies like, yeah, we're specialists. This is, we're the A-team. This is what we do, baby. And I'm here to get you from point A to point B when you need something special. And I very rarely see companies that can do both well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One last thing as we kind of wrap up here, guys. Rich, I'm going to pick on you. You're interviewing a guy, right? Or better yet, in something that happens to all three of us, somebody emails you or catches you at a trade show and says, you know what, I'm excited about this industry. I've got a computer science degree. I'd love to get into the industry. What's your advice? And don't tell me you should have been here 10 years ago. So, Steve, we'll start with you. I'm a brand new programmer. I'm 21, 22 years old, got my computer science degree. I'm excited. What is your advice as I enter into this industry?
It's funny because it's kind of happened to me recently, and I'll share more at a later date about the specifics. But I think the idea that you need to find a way to find a mentor. You need to look for a position that first off, our industry has a lot more to offer than just AV, and I think that if we look at ourselves as just being limited to AV and this stigma that AV has had, we're selling ourselves way too short. Our identity needs to include we are a provider that works with IT and is part of IT and is really we help people communicate, and I think there's an excitement there first off, but the idea of how do you get in is working alongside of somebody who's going to show you the ropes. There's a certain amount of this that is learned, but I think the vast majority of it is experienced, and being somebody who is open-minded and is willing to learn. There's a certainly a creative part of it, but there's a lot of it has to do with learning a little about a lot of things, and that's how you really are successful at this. And having the skills and the logical thinking is the foundation, and then being able to put that to good use and to problem solve and troubleshoot and be able to have a good handle on how to steer a customer and have those conversations and be personable. I think it's such a mix, and that's what makes what we do so interesting and unique. The idea of getting in on the ground floor with a company that is offering positions, say as a junior programmer or an intern or even a field tech that has the future goal of growing into being a programmer, that I think even taking somebody's program in the field and doing testing and interfacing with somebody who is willing to help you understand what's going on, I think that's a good career path for succeeding in this industry. And unfortunately, like Rich said, the easy jobs don't exist so much anymore. So breaking in is becoming a little harder. So I think you have to pay your dues, and you have to learn from experience and take the opportunity to work under somebody and do some of the dirty work for a little bit of time before you can actually get to a point where you can work on your own and elevate yourself to being a full programmer.
All right, Uncle Richie, same question to you. Give me some advice as I enter into the world of programming.
I think that Steve nailed part of it, which is that, are you ready to pay your dues? This is not you step in, not like the tech industry. It's not like you came out of a top flight CS program, and you've got 15 different startups who are going to offer you this, or you're going to come in as a programmer and make $160,000 out of the chute, because that's what the market is here, in San Francisco, right? For somebody with those skills, because there's a larger pool. But do you want to do something cool? Do you want to have fun? Do you want to find something that may be different? And do you want to find a way to have your voice heard? Because you're not necessarily going to have your unique voice heard in a company of 20,000 people. Yeah. So if you want to be able to have your voice heard in a company of 5 to 10 people, and if you want to make an impact, and you want the ability to learn, and again, I think that's really telling guys coming in, is that if you want to come in, if you want to make the effort, then make sure that you are partnering with somebody who is going to invest in giving you the tools necessary to be valuable, not just as a coach jockey, but again, the technical training, all of these things where it's more so than ever, the onus is on the business owners to invest in their workforce. And just because I'm too busy is not a good enough reason. Because if you always wait until you're not busy, well, you're going to get so not busy that the kid you brought in, you're going to say, sorry, I don't got work for you, kid. I got to let you go.
Yeah.
So you're cutting your nose to spite your face. And so what I see at that point is it's not only for the person coming in, but it's for the person who's going to do the hiring. Is what are you going to invest? Are you willing to mentor this? Are you willing to nurture? Are you willing to build this person into potentially, running their own company? And that's really what I look at, is that, especially coming into this industry, is how much of a burning desire do you have to be an entrepreneur? Because if your goal is just to kind of come in and punch a clock and do these things, then we may want to have a little bit of a longer talk about what this job is really about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, that is going to do it for us. With us has been Steve Greenblatt, Chief Everything at Control Concepts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Great to be back, and looking forward to talking with everybody again soon. Actually, if there are listeners out there who have ideas or want to be guests, please reach out.
We don't want to talk to anybody. What are you doing? We don't like people. How can people find you, sir? I was joking. Obviously, yes, he's right. How can people find you?
You can reach me. My website is controlconcepts.net. I'm on Twitter and many of the other social media platforms at Steve Greenblatt. And you and I will be actually talking about this topic similar with Commercial Integrator coming up on a webinar about how to work with different control platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, Uncle Richie at R Fregosa is his Twitter handle. Thank you, sir.
And you can also find me on Fregosa Design and cepro.com and on the other assorted interwebs. And obviously, it must have been a while since Uncle Richie's been away from the podcast, because I obviously decided to just napalm this whole show.
You had things to get off your chest. One thing real quickly, and I wanted to thank Rich for this. I help out the folks over at CI, at Commercial Integrator, and got an email from our friend Tom LeBlanc about a couple things and asking what I saw at CEDIA, and Steve did as well from a commercial side. And I mentioned your friends over at WaterCop who it's freaking cool. First of all, it's a sensor and a an automated shutoff valve for your water main. I'm simplifying it. If you check it out, it's on. Rich did a video of it at CE Pro, and Tom wrote about it at CI.
It's so practical and kind of slapped your forehead cool that it was awarded one of the 10 best products, one of the CEDIA products. It was given one of the 10 best new products at CEDIA.
Yeah, it's cool. And for a personal thing, they're like right outside my door. I mean, they're here in the St. Louis area, so. I was like, I know where that is. It's a small little town called St. Clair, Missouri. I'm like, I know where that is, and so we got to talking, and sure enough, they're just around the corner from me. So that was kind of cool. Cool. Yeah, don't follow me. I guess my Twitter is still active, I guess. But go by the website if you would, please, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. We are wrapping up 31 posts in 31 days. It's something we do to celebrate AV month, honestly. So we've done a different article, post, or show every single day this month. We'll wrap it up this Saturday on the 31st. Have a brand new show called Connected with David Danto. He looks at the Internet of Things and all the things that are surrounding that when it comes to AV. We have a brand new AV social. We have all sorts of bloggers from this month. Victoria Ferrari from Synergy CT out of Houston came up to CEDIA with us and helped us out. And she writes from her perspective, from a commercial perspective, her experience at her first CEDIA. So
which was a great write-up. I read it this morning.
Yeah, it was really good. It was really, really cool. And I was excited to get her perspective, right? Because she spent all of her career in commercial, right? So it was really cool. And she also did some interviews for us, so you can check those out on our YouTube page. So, but yeah, get started at AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been A State of Control.